Well, let's get some analysis now with Andrew Peek in Washington, D.C. He's a former senior director for European and Russian affairs at the U.S. National Security Council. He's currently a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Really good to have you with us, Andrew. Can I first get you to respond to this prospect of peace negotiations? It seems that Ukraine and Russia have quite steadfast views as to how these talks can take place. Ukraine says Russia will need to face a war crimes tribunal. It also needs to return all of the Ukrainian territory it seized, while Moscow, as we heard there, is saying that Ukraine needs to recognize Russian sovereignty over the territories that it's captured from Ukraine. It does seem like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place here, doesn't it? That peace talks in the near future seem unlikely.
That's absolutely right. There's not a lot of gray area or room for negotiation between the two parties. I think from Ukraine's point of view, they're quite right to impose maximalist political conditions. It's not clear why, when they're gaining ground successfully and on the offensive, despite the costs that Russia's imposing on it, that they would settle for anything less than the recapture of their territory, putting aside for a moment the issue of war crimes tribunals. I also think that there's no reason for Ukraine to think that if the ceasefire was achieved and that fighting stopped, Vladimir Putin would not spend the next 4 years thinking about how to recapture or relaunch more successfully an attack to gain greater territory in Ukraine. There would just be no confidence at all that would be accurate.
Meanwhile, we've seen almost 24 Russian attacks on Kherson in 24 hours. This was the city that Russia withdrew from just last month, surprising Ukrainian officials and much of the rest of the world. Why do you think Russia is so intent on reclaiming those cities such as Kherson, which it seemed to have withdrawn from just a moment ago?
Yeah, Russia's war plan in the East is incredibly confusing. They are throwing immense amounts of resources towards not particularly valuable strategic goals. Your correspondent pointed out two hotspots at the moment, Kherson and Bakhmut in the East. Kherson looks to me to be two things. One is Russia trying to prevent the recapture of Kherson, which had been an early success in the Russian war for Russia. Russia is trying to prevent the recapture of Kherson by Ukraine, the liberation, from becoming this feel-good story that inspires the recapture of the rest of Ukraine. If Russia can make it hellish and awful enough by dropping enough missiles onto it, by making the return a misery, then perhaps Ukraine's appetite for a ceasefire will grow. I also think they're trying to keep resources away, Ukrainian resources away from the fighting in the east, where it's heavier. Now, the town of Bakhmut. This is bizarre to virtually every military analyst. Bakhmut is not a particularly strategically significant town. Yes, if they had it, Russia could direct artillery fire onto nearby towns it used to occupy, like Slavyansk, which was an early symbol of separatist victory in 2014. But at this point, and with the amount of not just Russian military, but Russian allied fighters like Chechens, Wagner Group that are being thrown into this fight, thousands and thousands of people, any military value for Bakhmut has completely flown out the window. It's clear that somebody wants to point to Putin, or maybe Putin himself, on the map and say, we recaptured Bakhmut like we promised.
Okay, Andrew Peek, we will have to leave it there, but really great to get your analysis. Thank you very much again for joining us.